Started. Welcome. My name's Elizabeth Vaught, if you couldn't tell. Thanks for your patience with the Zoom glitch. Now I know if you forward someone's unique Zoom link, they show up with your name. So I didn't know that before. Now I know that. I thought I knew all there was to know about Zoom. So thanks for attending today. Our agenda for this afternoon, we have an hour together. We're going to start with a welcome, and I think it will just happen via the chat. If you could add in your name and where you are, where you're serving, that would be helpful. And we know who's in the room today, and we can introduce ourselves, and it'll save you from having to change your name, your username. We're going to talk about principal development and evaluation today. That's what you signed up for. We're going to talk about what it is, what is the purpose of the principal development and evaluation, what are the resources available, what guidance is out there, and what might I do in my role. You all have varying roles, and I'll show you a snapshot of that so you can see that who's in the room. We'll hopefully have some time for questions near the end. Please note that you had a lot of questions in your registration, and they were all wonderful, and I have an hour today, so I'm going to do my best to address as many as possible and know that not all will be addressed. So my hope is to continue the conversation in the future and to follow up after this session as well. This is a very high-level overview today. So note that a lot of your questions were rather specific, which is wonderful. And this session today will be more of a high-level session. When I follow up, hopefully I'll be able to answer any lingering questions. And know that when I'm talking about principal development and evaluation, I'll use the acronym PDE. It's shorthand, it makes it a lot easier, it's convenient, but keep in mind that I highlighted that word development for a reason. We want to focus on the development. That's where our emphasis is. So we'll talk more about that as I go along. And when we think about the evaluation component, I liken it a bit to standardized testing and MCA testing. When we think about the growth of students, often the MCA tests, for example, get a lot of attention, and they're not the point. Good instruction is the point. And I liken that to PDE because maybe the evaluation is required by statute and it's a byproduct. What is most important is that support that is provided to our school leaders. So that's where I want to put that emphasis today. And also a note about the language I'll be using. I'll use the word principal and I'll use the word superintendent. And I know that that may not be the dynamic in every district, in every corner, especially in charters. There's a lot of different titles that are used. So I'll use principal and superintendent as shorthand for the building leader and the person supervising that building leader. So note that. So who am I? My name is Liz Vaught, Elizabeth in my email address. I'm a member of a 7-member principal leadership support team that serves leaders throughout the state. We have a flyer that I'll share with you later. We support leaders throughout the state in individual coaching and professional development and networks as well. I'm the person on the team that also has a dual role, and another portion of my role is to support PDE throughout the entire state. So I coach and support leaders in the metro area, and I support any and all leaders regarding PDE throughout the state. So my name is Liz. A bit about me, I taught and have held leadership positions in 3 different states, earned my doctorate in educational leadership in Arizona before coming to Minnesota. And I served as a school principal here in Minnesota for 9 years. This is my 3rd year working for the Department of Education and being a member of the PLS team. And I'm really grateful here to provide some of this information for you, and know that we're recording this conversation, and there are many resources that are available on demand, as they say. And I think I neglected to say thank you to MASA, MASSP, and MESPA for sponsoring this event today. They are also here with us and in the chat, and I really appreciate their support in getting the word out to all of you. So who is in the room? Who is registered for this? There's a wide variety of locations and roles within this room today. And I apologize if I didn't get your little red dot on the map in time, but there's a pretty equal split between those who are serving in the building leadership role and those in the superintendency or assistant superintendent role. So I hope this session is an inspiration for you to collaborate on meeting the needs of school leaders. This isn't about a superintendent getting information and then, you know, having a little individual project over the summer. This is about how can we collaborate as districts to better meet the needs of our leaders. In the registration, I asked a few questions. I asked about what's working well in your systems, and I believe Anna reshared the slide deck, so that's available to you as well. So you gave me a lot of different ideas about what's working well, and they fell to me in 4 different categories. You talked about the alignment of the support for the principal in the larger system of supports and in the goals of the district and teacher goals and connection to the Minnesota competencies, that having PDE as a part of a larger system was effective. You also talked about individual parts of your system that are effective. Like, it's great that I can develop my own goals. It's great that I have time for reflection. Excuse me, that we have these scheduled check-ins happening. So you mentioned those as well. You talked about the process as both a consistent, predictable process and also as a flexible, changeable process that can grow as our leadership roles change. And you talked about the relationship between the leader and the supervisor as being really key component of that, and that being really effective, that we have a trusting relationship. I saw that a number of times. I also asked you about what has been a challenge, and there was a response from school leaders about, well, when we have this turnover, it makes it hard to have that predictable set system that's really effective. And supervisors also asked, how do I get better at this? I want to be better at providing feedback, providing professional development. So there were some keys to that you mentioned. Time was also a huge issue, which it always is, and how the role of the principal, especially over the pandemic, has evolved, and maybe our PDE system has not. So there's a disconnect there for some of you. And we also I also saw some ideas that connected to systems or mindsets where it's a thing we have to get done, and when fires start burning elsewhere, it doesn't meet the help with our growth as much as we would like it to. It's not as meaningful when there are these other priorities, such as being a pandemic principal, so to speak. So things get in the way sometimes, and making it a priority has been a struggle, not for lack of a desire, for lack of perhaps time.
No, come on in.
I also asked you to mention some things that you're wondering about in thinking about PDE systems, and you mentioned a few different things. What are we required to do? What is the minimum? What's the bottom line? So hopefully we'll address those questions today. You also wanted to know more about what's working elsewhere and what are other districts doing, and that's a fantastic question, and I will refer to that a little later. And you also were curious about what are the resources available, and I will be the first to admit that the MDE website is not the most user-friendly website in the world. I hope that's not a shock to you. I would assume I'm preaching to the choir on that. So hopefully I'll give you some resources that will help you find some key documents that will really help you out. So why principal development and evaluation? One of the a recent survey that I know some of you participated in was the U of M and Carey did a statewide survey of principals, and it's very relevant to our topic today. There were a lot of things that we could pull from it. These are a few of the things I wanted to pull out because it's notable that most respondents in this survey said that the workload is not sustainable for us right now. And most said, more than most said, they felt supported by their leaders. And this really reinforces the importance of a flexible and changeable system that meets the needs of your leaders. If the workload is not sustainable and yet there's a system of support, how can we adjust our system of support so that we are meeting those needs? So that I thought was really helpful. And I'll give you a moment to read a key quote that I put a box around that I found in the implications portion of the survey. And I'll note that this is a hyperlink up here at the top if you want to learn more about the survey. But I'd like you to take a moment to read this, the beginning of this quote. A key phrase from this that really sticks out to me, that both a clear direction from our supervisors and the time to accomplish and live out those goals are really key. And I see PDE and the system of support that you create as an excellent tool to accomplish that goal of.
So they were supposed to be working on notes?
Yeah.
Sorry. Check to make sure you're muted, everybody. Thanks, Mia. So I think the PDE is about how do we simplify and support? How do we make more with less? And time is an issue with that as well. So something to think about as we frame this. So I'd like to start with defining that. When I say PDE or principal development and support, what am I saying? It is a both and. So as I mentioned, when I see principal and the statute in itself may be referring to assistant principals. In the charter world, although charters are not held to the traditional school statute, it is supporting of leaders is what we want to see in all of our schools. So it might be the director, it might be the executive director. So principal being that person that is supporting instruction in a school. And then development, thinking about the systems that you have in place to support that growth of your leaders. So the components that you mentioned, such as the coaching and professional development, goal setting, professional learning communities between leaders, that is the development component. And then the evaluation is, how are we measuring that growth? How are we looking at the support of our leaders through a measurement lens? So it's about collaboration and it is growth focused. It is not about discipline. If we think about where you've seen the most effective teacher evaluations, it is a coaching relationship. It is about supporting that instructor to be the best that they can be. And ideally, just as we see in many teacher evaluation systems, we ideally hope for it to be co-created by the stakeholders that are involved. So not something that is done to our leaders, but done with our leaders and co-created with them. So it's both this system of support and those measures as well. I'll give you a moment to contemplate that. And I'm going to ask Anne to put in the chat a Jamboard, and I'll ask you to think about the idea of the purpose of a PDE system. So when we think about why do we do this? I'm going to ask you to think about this from 3 different lenses within a district. So it's the same question for you. What is the purpose of PDE? But you're thinking about it from 3 perspectives. From the perspective of the superintendent or the assistant superintendent, whoever is that supervisor of the principal. You're thinking about it from that building leader perspective, and think about it from the teacher perspective. And I'd love for you to add 1 or 2 words, 3 words max, of when you think about the purpose, what word would you use? What words would you use if you were thinking from that lens? If you have not used a Jamboard in the past, it is there on the left side, there is a little square that looks like a Post-it. You add your word or 2 and click, I think it's enter, and it'll show up as a Post-it note, and you can move that around. So I'm going to encourage you, I'll challenge you to start with a role that is not your own. So I'm assuming that that none of you are currently classroom teachers, so perhaps you would start with that teacher role. So let's take a few minutes to think about these perspectives, and then we'll come back together and add your Post-it notes as you go.
Elizabeth, I'm not sure if you're able to see the chat or not, but there's a lot of error messages that come up when you try to get to the Jamboard, so you might want to continue.
Thanks, Deb. I apologize for that. I can pull it up here. You should be seeing that so that we can take a look. Thank you, Deb. So from these different perspectives, I'm seeing on the superintendent page a lot of growth, reflection, identifying strengths, affirming that leader, thinking about focus on student achievement. On the page for building leaders, some of the same words, support and growth. I see the word clarity, growth and inspiration. That's a powerful word. Support for professional development, collaboration, alignment, personal growth, individual growth. And then on the teacher page, see growth again. Support, strengthen, supportive, capacity. So there's a through line there of that growth and support, which is great to see. And if you, and I apologize for the issue with the link. If you think about what if all of these Post-it notes were from people within one district, and what might be the implications of that? There's a lot of alignment, and then what if those perspectives are misaligned, or what if there are unintended consequences of different thinking between those individuals? So something to consider as we move on, because I'm going to be coming back to this idea of co-creation of your PDE system, and how are you collaborating to have these same perspectives and goals and agree on this as a system, so that there isn't that misalignment. And I'm going to encourage you to start with purpose, so that you can always come back to that. Just like we do with mission and vision for our schools, we come back to why are we here and what are we doing? So that can drive the work that you're doing. And this is a very intentional question to start with, so that it can drive the rest of the conversations that you're having. So let's dive into a bit of the meat of some of this content. So you'll hear me use the word model, and I use that because that's a word that I hear a lot of others use. I use the word system a lot, and those are synonyms. What we're talking about is the entirety of the PDE support that is provided. So it might be the system that's been developed by a school district or a charter in general. It might be something that is adopted from elsewhere. And a couple of examples of those are the Minnesota model that was developed a while back. It might be the model that was developed by the associations, which is the evaluation of Minnesota school principals, and those links are there if you'd like to access them. And it might be a hybrid of the two. You might have taken the Minnesota model and said, well, this works for us, this doesn't, what can we adjust? So whatever model or system you're using could be any combination of those options. It doesn't have to be X, Y, or Z. It should be a local system that works for you. And so as I said, I'll be using the word system so as a synonym for model. And another reminder that the statute regards traditional public schools. There's other language that is specifically for charters, and I've put those all together on one document, and I don't know if oh yep, Anne has been able to share that. So there's a document in the chat that I'll call the PDE checklist. For lack of a better word, to if you're wanting
Good,
to
how are you?
quickly, got somebody who's unmuted. I don't have the power to do that. Thanks, man. So if you're wanting to find out quickly, do we have everything we need? This is a document that might be very helpful. Again, very high level. It takes the statute, which is a few paragraphs, and turns it into I think, a bit more usable document that can lay out for you what are the things that we need to make sure we have. I'll show you some more information later that I don't necessarily think this is the first place to start, unless you're feeling really strongly that the system you have is effective and you want to have some checks and balances to make sure that you're on the right page. So something to keep in mind. When we think about the statute, so that document that Anne shared is the nitty-gritty. When you pull back from the details of the statute and you ask, what is the goal of a PDE model or a PDE system? It is very bluntly to support and improve the principal's leadership capacity. That is the goal of yours and mine and everyone's PDE system. It should have this goal of improving the capacity of that leader. So while the statute might be very dense and have a lot of language, you can come back to this point and use this as a starting point to consider your purpose as a system when you're evaluating, is it working for us? Is it not working for us? The statute does have some requirements that you might want to keep in mind. Those, again, they're in the checklist. There's a few multiple measures that must be included, including the observations, on-the-job observations is what they're called, and a goal that is at least 35% related to student academic growth data. That doesn't say MCA data. It doesn't say any particular test. So I encourage people to think outside the box, and there are some resources on the website that walk you through, okay, if we want to use this data, here's what a goal might look like. So there are ways to think outside the box with that, and I really encourage people to do that and consider carefully what is the purpose of your PDE system and what data will help you understand if you're accomplishing that purpose. The statute mentions that that the system must be formative and summative. It does say in that last bullet that it will be an annual evaluation. And although that annual summative piece is part of the statute, I would hope that the pieces, the components, those multiple measures are very formative in nature, and that just like we're talking about a standardized test at the end of the year, there's a great deal that happens throughout the year to support our students and to support our leaders in their PDE system on the way to that summative. It also should include professional goals and professional development, whether that is separate from teachers or district leadership, that is a local decision. Professional development should be a component of that PDE system. So these are some musts. The statute also mentions some might, or it may include, and those two that I wanted to highlight are, one, if you within your system you have a determination of this is a principal not meeting the standards, then what is that improvement plan for that leader? What is that embedded support that we as a district will be providing that leader to help them improve? So that is an addition if that happens within your system. And I've also included the language directly from the statute about surveys, that you might have a survey. You can if you choose to, and this is an option. And I'll say a little bit more about that, but this is the language that is used within the statute. And what I'd like to say about surveys is that they're not required. And I personally, as Elizabeth thought, don't recommend them if they are not done in a collaborative way that will build trust within your system. If it is, if they're wielded as a weapon, if they're not supporting growth of the leader, if they're not coming back to that purpose of supporting and improving the leader's capacity, then they're doing more harm than good. So I'm happy to have more conversation with people about that. And there's a resource on the MDU website about best practices for using stakeholder feedback. And I have some feelings about that. And I'm sure some of the people in the room have feelings about that. To put it shortly, if it's not done in a way that is productive, don't do it. I'd also like to make a mention of rubric, because you might have noticed that having a rubric as a part of your PDE system is not necessarily mentioned. It is a meaningful component, and I'll tell you why that is because when we think about the standards that we have or the competencies, it is telling you the what of leadership. It is not defining for your leaders the how do I accomplish this? How do I live this day to day, or as Katie Pickell would say, on a Tuesday in January, what does this look like for me? So an example of that I'll share is say you're using within your PDE system the PECL standards, the professional standards for educational leaders. So say that is the operational tool that you're using to say this is what excellent leadership looks like. The standards that are within PECL don't give you that how. So this is an example of standard 3. If you think about that first one, ensure that each student is treated fairly, respectfully, and with an understanding of each student's culture and context. That's a great statement, wonderful. And what does that look like for me as an elementary principal, as a high school assistant principal? What does that mean for me in my day-to-day work? And that is the work of the co-creation of the system. And that is the tool of a rubric that can be helpful to you in saying, this is what it looks like, or here are products or items that I might see or on your website, or things that you might be using on a day-to-day basis in your data discussions that exemplify this standard. So I see a mistake that I see in districts is starting with the rubric and saying, oh, we need a PDE system. What are some rubrics I might use? The first step, as I mentioned, is I believe in starting with that purpose and starting with a conversation about what do we want leadership to look like in our system, in our district, and thinking about a rubric that will fit to those needs, not pulling up a rubric and saying, how do we fit what we're doing into this rubric? So not wanting people to put the cart before the horse, and know that you as a district are empowered to to modify existing rubrics. If you find a rubric that you think, oh, okay, yeah, I think some of this is really valid and our principals are really responding to this, do we need to tweak this? Do we need to make it more relevant to us at a local level so that it works for us? So I'm always encouraging people to go back to that purpose, go back to what is your goal, and then the tools should match that. I have no problem with anyone picking up something like the Minnesota model and saying, yep, this is what we're going to do, because it is highly research-based. It was piloted in Minnesota. It is focused in this area, and it meets all the requirements. Fantastic. That said, there may be components of you might think this is not quite working for us. We have this other thing we use, and that is meaningful. You have that ability to tweak as you see fit. And how are these tools supporting a leader's capacity in the work that we're doing? There are many rubrics out there, and I have an inventory of many of them. When I came on board, there wasn't such a document, so that was one of the first things I did, was scour the internet for all of the school leadership rubrics that are out there, and I have them all collected, and I'm happy to share some of those with you. Again, it's not about seeing a list and picking one. It's about what is our goal, what is our purpose, and always coming back to that. So I also want to mention there are many resources available on the website, and Anna is going to share in the chat the website help sheet for you. And I was going to spend some time on that, but I think, you can do that on your own and use this guide as you like. Know that the principal development and evaluation page is available for you on the main MDE site, and that's the URL is linked at the top of that document that Anne put in the chat. There are 3 sections to the website. There's one that is specifically for principals, and that is based on the 7 leadership practices that our team uses to support principals throughout the state. The other is for principal supervisors, and there's resources there on coaching and supporting your leaders through that reflective conversation. And then there's a page that is focused on the growth-focused evaluation systems that includes everything you need to know about the Minnesota model. It includes resources about developing surveys, if you choose to do that, of here's an example timeline you might use, what might you do during the different months of the year to support leaders. So know that there's a plethora of resources, and if you have to put this away and then come back to it in June and you can't remember any of this, you can always email me or call me, and I'm happy to help walk you through that. Or you say, you know what, I'm looking for something just about this. Can you help me with that? Yes, I can do that. So so I've tried to reformat the website so that it's a bit more user-friendly, and it still can be a little hard to find the things you're looking for. So never hesitate to send me an email and say, hey, where do I find this? I'm happy to do that for you. You shouldn't have to hold all of that in your head. I do want to point out some of the key resources that are on the site related specifically to PDE. There are great resources about lots of different things, but you're here today to consider PDE, so I want to make sure you walk away with the key documents for that. One of them was already shared in the chat, the PDE checklist, and that, as I mentioned, it does have the details about what must and might a PDE system include. If you want to go well into the weeds with that, you're welcome to take a look at the statute, and there's an implementation guide as well. I think I mentioned there's lots of very detailed resources about the different components. So section 2 talks about how do I meet the requirements of PDE so that I make sure we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And what do you mean on the job observations? What is that? What do you mean by that? So there's details about that. So those are some of the what do I have to do questions answered. And there's also an FAQ that I find helpful that answers some frequently asked questions, obviously, and things that come up for people. Do I have to do this? Do I have to use this? What could this look like? And then it provides some links as well. So that can be a helpful document. One I want to spend a little bit of time on is this template. So say I'm, we're relatively happy with the system we have. We know it can be better. We want to make some improvements. You're talking about co-creation. What does that look like? We get in the room together, and then what? So the link that Anne is going to put in the chat for you, I'm calling a PDE system template, and it will force you to make a copy. So you have your own, and as always, you can edit however you like to make it work for your team. But when you get in that room together, say your principals and your assistant superintendent and your superintendent are together, and you're there to talk about your PDE system. Like I said, start with that purpose. I've provided with you some guiding questions to help you with what I see as steps in the process. It is an iterative process, and there are ways to do it so that you're going in a particular order and not overwhelming yourself. Because if you commit to 2 hours, we're going to do everything. I think that's a lot to take on. So this chunks it for you and gives you an opportunity to ask some questions, have some dialogue, and consider what you need to do with that information. And I've proposed some possible outcomes. For example, if the question is, what is our vision for PDE system? You might walk away from that conversation with a shared purpose and shared understanding of, within our district, here are our beliefs and values about PDE, and have that common understanding. That's a big step. You don't necessarily have a tool or a thing that you can email to someone, but you certainly have a shared understanding. And then walks you through defining that effective principle, which I mentioned. If we have adopted Marzano, so to, for example, what does that mean for us? And is there a rubric involved? Is that working for us? Are there levels of performance? How are we interpreting that? What do we mean by that? And all of the logistics that go around that. So it is a 3-page document that hopefully will provide you with an opportunity to frame your conversation. And I'm happy to share this with you, and I'm happy to walk through this with you as a thought partner. But hopefully some of these key questions will help you in that conversation. And I'll show you a bit more about what that might look like in a moment. So these are some key resources, and my goal is not to overwhelm you with things, but also give you one-stop shop so that when you do have time to really unpack this, then you have one place where all of this lives and you can come back to it. A couple of options to consider. We, our principal leadership support team, we're planning on having a community of practice specifically for schools and districts who want to go through this work. So that template that I showed you, we want to unpack this. We're not sure how to do it. We're not sure how much time to dedicate to it. We'd like to set that set that time aside for you so that you can commit as a team to doing that work. That's not to say if you have 10 schools that all 10 principals would be a part of this. I would ask that that teams from a district, which would include at least one principal and principal supervisor, to come together to have these conversations as representative of your larger district. And we were hoping to have a registration for you today, but realized that there may be a lot of different options that you would be interested in. We might have a one-day training physically together where your team can come and set that time aside. And we're also thinking about having some periodic sessions. So when you get the feedback form, I'll be asking you to indicate what are you interested in? If you are interested in this, what might be your preference, so that I can then develop a registration and let you know about it. Because I don't think any of us know what the fall will bring, but we want to be as prepared with your time as possible. I mentioned that this statute does relate to traditional public schools. That said, any and all charter leaders are welcome to attend this. If you see your system as supportive of this, then absolutely, please attend. if you feel like you would be better served by a community that is purely for charter leaders, we're having conversations with that, and we'll be talking to some charter leaders early this summer about what that might look like. If board members would attend, would we ask authorizers to be involved? We'd like to get your thoughts on that. So if you have specific thoughts about how this could look for differently for a charter world, we're very open to that and want to hear that. So we'll most likely be offering something specifically for charters as well, but that's a both and for charter leaders. As I mentioned, our principal leadership support team provides individualized support and professional development, and we have a lookup tool on the website that if you're not sure what region you're in, you can look that up. And I mentioned that my role is specifically to support PDE, so you're welcome to reach out to me at any time, email me, ask questions, and I'd be happy to support your district individually if that's something that you want to do. I'm very open to that, and I can even travel, so it doesn't all have to be virtual. But there's a spot on the feedback form for you to indicate that if you're interested in individual support as well. So so then I will reach out to you, so you don't have to worry about keeping track of my contact information. So I want to, you might be wondering, okay, where do we start? There's a community of practice, there's individual support, there's all these resources. I think the handy place to start is to think about your current reality. Where are we in the effectiveness of our current support system for our school leaders? And if there's nothing in place, or you're not convinced it's effective, or maybe it's somewhat effective, and even if it is effective, I recommend to everyone, as you can see, to start with that purpose. It might be starting from scratch. It might be reviewing that purpose. It might be developing a common understanding of what's our purpose. So wherever you are in thinking about that effectiveness, having a collaborative conversation is a great place to start, just to figure out where are we and where might we go. I also recommend for those who want to make revisions to think about the resources that are available, and diving into that template perhaps, and thinking about what are our priorities here. And I hope you notice that both of those boxes start with as a team. So again, this is not a task for an individual to work on over the summer. This is a collaborative process we are hoping that you can be co-creating together. And I hope, just as you sit down with your teachers at the beginning of the year and ask about their goals, you can be doing that with principals as well. And that is an individual and a collective conversation. And we saw another point from the principal survey was the desire to have networks of leaders. Leaders want to be talking to other leaders and learning from other leaders. And so we're hoping to build opportunities for that and really encourage you to be doing that within your system as well. How are your leaders collaborating as a PLC? How are they using data to support each other in their practices? So these are questions to ask collectively. And consider attending the community of practice. All are welcome. If you want to dive into this work and get started on it, we're happy to have you. And if you feel, we have a really solid system in place right now, and you want to check to make sure, yes, we're doing everything we are quote unquote supposed to be doing, then you can use that checklist as a check on, do we have everything we want, but starting with that conversation as well. So I'd like to circle back to the Jamboard, and I will apologize and ask for you to use the chat if you cannot access that Jamboard. I'd like you to think about two things. We'll take a couple of minutes, and then I'll share with you a little more information. Based on what you're hearing and what you already know about PDE systems, what is one next step that your district or your school could take in the next 6 months that would make a difference for you? And that's on page 4 of the Jamboard, and I will pull that up in just a moment. And then on page 5, okay, that's a possible next step. So what is a question you might ask your school principal or your supervisor, your superintendent in the next 6 months to get that ball rolling. And I'll pull that up so we can see it, and it is anonymous, so so I'll pull that up. So a step you can take on page 4 and page 5, a question you could ask. I'll give you a couple of minutes to think about those before I move on. A lot of options here. I like the strategic planning. What are our first steps? So your first step might be to determine what's our first step. And that's okay, especially if you are not using anything right now. And I want to remove any stigma about that. You know, people will whisper, "We don't have anything. We're not evaluating our principals," and that's okay. All are welcome. I mean, it's let's start from today. Let's not talk about the past. Let's move forward and talk to your principals about what they need now, and let's move forward from that. So we can't change the past. We can start to have these conversations and not have shame about it. Instead, think about how are we going to grow. And sometimes starting from scratch can be easier than starting with something that hasn't worked well and might have some baggage or some cultural downsides to it. And I'll flip to that last page. What's a question you could ask? What supports do you need? What do you want to get out of this? How can I better support you? Oh, what would you like to represent your good work? I'm thinking, so what artifacts might you have that show the work that you're doing? How do we measure it? What do you believe is the purpose? What's your priority? Yeah. Principals told us that loud and clear in the survey is, I feel supported and I can't keep doing this. This is not working. Something has to change. And a PDE system is a great lever to say, here are our collective priorities. This is where we will put our energy. And yes, you have those little fires you have to put out every day. And here's where we're going to put our energy together. I hope this can help you commit to asking these questions next time you and your colleagues are together. Finally, I want to share with you a couple of opportunities that are coming up. If you have a loads of time this summer, I say it facetiously, we invite you to be a part of 2 different summer and fall book studies that we're starting in June. And Anne is putting the link in the chat if you want to read more about those and consider being a part of them. We also, at one of our listening sessions for principals, we heard loud and clear that you want more communication with PELSB about licensure and your role within that. So we have a Q&A coming up with PELSB on June 21st, and the link to the registration there is in the chat as well, so you can view those. And finally, I would love to hear from you. This is a lot of information. It's a bit of a fire hose, and you've been listening to me for way too long. And so I'd love to hear from you, your takeaways and your questions that are still lingering for you right now, so that we can plan for our next steps. The feedback form also has a question for you about whether or not you would like to get some individualized support, or you have a question about some resources, and I will follow up with you. And if you'd be interested in the community of practice, what setup might work for you in the fall. So this will be helpful for us as we move forward, and I appreciate you taking the time to do that. So I want to pause here to give you time to do the feedback form. And if there are lingering questions, I've not been watching the chat. So Deb or anyone else, if you want to unmute, if you saw some questions you think I can address. Otherwise, if there are questions I can't address right now, I can follow up in an email with those answers. And did you see anything that I should circle back to?
No, we had a link issue, but Carrie figured it out and put an adjusted link in the chat for that checklist. So thanks, Carrie.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, some of the resources on the MDE site they download as PDFs, so the links can be a little tricky.
And I wish we knew who all the Elizabeth bots were out there, because there's some good comments coming in.
Oh my goodness. So now I know if Deb Henton forwards you an invite to your own private Zoom link and you forward that to 90 people, those people show up as your name.
Yeah, you're thanking yourself a lot here today, Liz.
Yes, I am. I appreciate everyone's time, and I fully recognize you may be dropping in to think about this today and cannot think about it again for another couple of months. Yes, absolutely. I've been a leader in May. I know what it's like. So if you need to pick this back up again or email me, yes, I work over the summer. I'm happy to chat with you or help you find things. So thank you. And Deb or John or Bob, if you wanted to say anything, feel free, and I will, I'll stop here.
Well, I would just thank those participants that are remaining. What a great turnout. I hope you find this helpful, and I had an error in my message, but if you find other topics where you think principals and superintendents or directors of technology, directors of curriculum and instruction, any of our component groups should come together with the members of our other organizations that are helping to sponsor this event, please don't hesitate to let Bob, John, or myself know, because we want to try to meet your needs, and we're really pleased we can offer this Zoom class for free of charge to you and help you with your professional development needs. Elizabeth, thank you so much, and so good to see you as well. Thanks for the chat messages.